It's a crowd out here. Okay. All right, so really quick, before I start my story, I just have to say, sorry, Dad, I did steal this a couple of years ago. It was his lake jacket, and if you look closely, there's stain or paint from all the times that he had to stain the deck or paint the cottage or anything. So anyway, sorry. He told me specifically not to steal this, and then I absolutely did.
Is he here?
Yeah, he's here. He's back there. Steve Shaw. You can give a little wave. That's my dad. All right, so my grandmother, Nancy Shaw, once dreamed of having an A-frame cottage on a lake. So in the fall of 1959, my grandfather, Dr. Byers Wendell Shaw Sr., set out to build that A-frame for his wife and his 3 kids, one of which is my dad. They found land on Rocky Fork Lake. The plans were drawn up, and a construction crew was hired. My grandpa, who was a busy country surgeon from Washington Courthouse, would make that 40-minute drive from Washington Courthouse to the build site as often as he could to kind of help out with construction. He was a pretty handy guy. Later in life, he would carve pens and knives and give them out to anybody who would accept them. And I wonder what his drives to and from that building site were like. Was he tired? Did he get overwhelmed with all the decisions to be made, with the work to be done, the tasks to be completed? And as the cottage started to take shape, I learned that the family would camp on the platform that had been built. I imagine that sleeping there in a tent under the stars, under the trees, must have felt a little bit like you were living in your own treehouse or in your own fort. And then when it came time to build the deck off the back of the house, as the house itself came together, there was a dogwood tree that was out back. And I remember this very distinctly from my childhood. But there's an existing dogwood tree. And so my grandmother, who unfortunately I actually never got to meet, she died from lung cancer when my dad was 9. She insisted, do not take this tree down. You have to build the deck around this dogwood tree. And so even when I was a little kid, it's gone now, unfortunately, but when I was a little kid, at the lake, we would always just kind of marvel at the fact that there was this tree coming up through our back deck. Okay, so, and I think that dogwood tree really kind of added to that tree house or that kind of fort effect. So finally, in the spring of 1961, the cottage was complete. And again, I wonder, when my grandpa and my grandma walked into that house, into that cottage for the first time, did they even have any inkling of what they had built? Did they know that they had built this magic place where generations of Shaws would find belonging and joy? So fast forward about 30 years to my childhood, our entire extended family on my dad's side would get together every July 4th and Thanksgiving. Up until 1996, the cottage was just an A-frame, and then it got a much-needed addition as our family started to kind of burst at the seams. But up until then, just kind of imagine this little A-frame. It had 2 bunk rooms, very small bunk rooms. It had a pull-out bed in the living space. And then in this loft area, there was just a whole bunch of twin-sized beds, all just crammed in there for us to sleep in. And so we're just imagine these 8 adults, 8 kids, all stuffed into this little house, right? So we're kind of on top of each other. I imagine for the adults, as a kid, I thought it was great. It was magical, right? But for the adults, I'm sure that they probably felt the stress of that every once in a while, okay, we're on top of each other. So I see why they added onto it. Now, for me as a kid, the loft was this really cool, magical place. Again, it kind of had that fort-like tree house feeling. It was packed with those bunk beds, like I mentioned, and that's where my sisters and my cousins and I would all sleep when we went to the lake. We built blanket forts and jumped on the beds when the parents weren't paying attention. And then at night, we would stay up way too late, whispering to each other and giggling. Inevitably, one of the boys would rile us up, and the kids in the back are going to like this, with loud farting. Yes, very loud. And so we'd all get a little riled up, right? And without fail, an adult would yell up at us to go to bed. stop, calm down, be quiet, and maybe we'd quiet down for a little bit. And then of course we got back into it. Eventually we fell asleep, but and then all of this really continued through my teen years, even into my young adult ages, before I got married, all of that. And we would just continue to lie in those twin-sized beds, cracking jokes, having the best time with each other. The other thing that I want to share is that we had this tradition of hiking on Thanksgiving Day. Now, that sounds really lovely, right? Well, here's the thing, is that we would do this hike that was 2.2 miles long, which is not bad, right? Everybody's like, oh, this is doable. Well, here's the thing. The first, 1.25, 1.5 miles of this hike is just like a straight shot up, okay? It's like a climb. And it's called the Fort Trail at Fort Hill. And every year we'd load up the vans, go to it. All of us kids were like, oh my gosh, why are we doing this again? I don't even know when this started, but we were like, okay, we got to do this hike again. Uncle Ben says we have to. And so we gripe about it. And then of course we always had a good time, right? We hated it, but we loved it. We'd get up to the top and you're looking around. And if you haven't hiked at Fort Hill out in Hillsboro, check it out. It's great. And you get to the top and there's these beautiful views and you're just kind of looking around and you're seeing your whole family there. You're doing something together and it's so beautiful. And you just feel like you have this sense of belonging just through that hike. And you just realize how beautiful your family is. Okay, so third little section of my story is that on Wednesday, July 3rd of 2013, my grandfather died at home in Washington Courthouse at the age of 93. It was a good long life. The family had planned, like usual, to go and gather at the cottage for July 4th. I remember being so grateful that we would be together as we mourned the loss of our patriarch, the man whose dream made our tight-knit, unique family ties possible. Some of us were already at the cottage when we got the news, and I remember being so grateful for that too, to learn of my grandfather's passing in a place where I felt safe and I felt like I belonged somewhere. Now, the weather was really weird that July. It was rainy and kind of chilly, which is not usual for a 4th of July, right? If we've been to the Independence Day event in Madeira, we know it's hot. If you've walked up the hill in the parade, you know it's hot. So it was kind of like the earth knew what it had been lost. And because it had been raining all day that next day on Thursday, on the 4th, we started to get a little restless because even though we had made this addition to the house, it's still, there's still like 1 million people there, right? Like there's 19 adults, 2 babies, 3 dogs, and probably like a partridge in a pear tree somewhere. So we were on top of each other and having to be cooped up inside all the time, especially when you're expecting to be out on the boat, hiking, whatever. We get a little restless. We feel like we're a little cramped, right? So what did we do? Someone, probably my dad, knowing how handy he is, came up with the idea to build some kind of structure outside because we had a deck and we had a front covered porch. But on the deck that kind of wrapped around the house, it did not have any kind of coverage. So we just had this like tiny little front porch to sit on outside. And they found some rope, some scrap wood, a huge tarp, and then just kind of fixed up this little adult fort for us to sit under as we shared stories with my grandfather and kind of shared in our grief. So that night, with the rain coming down all around us, we sat around and talked about how lucky we were, how what we had was so rare, an extended family that got together regularly and everyone loved it. I have been hearing all these stories from people, they gripe when they had to go to family reunions. And for me, even to this day, it's like the best time of my life. We shared a lot of stories. Remember when Grandpa cooked those squirrel brains at Thanksgiving? True. Country man, okay? Remember when Grandpa got the Care Bear clock during the White Elephant gift exchange and he just loved it? Remember when Grandpa made turtle soup from what we think was an actual turtle, but we're still not actually sure. Remember how he water skied until he was 80 years old? Remember. In the midst of our grief, we found solace and we found joy. That night under our tarp fort, we belonged to each other. So to wrap it all up, because I'm going on too long, as I always do. So last fall, most of the family convened at the cottage for Thanksgiving for the first time since COVID. It was really meaningful. My cousins, my sisters, and I are all grown up with our own kids now. So these days, the next generation is up in that loft. They're the ones building the blanket forts, jumping on the beds when they think we're not looking, and resisting bedtime, of course.
Farting.
And probably farting, yeah. Absolutely. So on Thanksgiving night, after the kids had been put to bed, or so we thought, the adults were sitting around the kitchen table playing various games, Quirkle, which is my mother's favorite. Hi, Kimmy. Drinking wine and catching up. Every so often, we'd hear the giggles and chatter of the kids upstairs who should be asleep. So I remember my cousin Brad shouts up for them to go be quiet and go to sleep. This happened several more times, with a few of us even taking turns to go upstairs, shush them, tuck kids back into bed, etc. We'd collectively groan each time. Like, oh, why won't they just go to bed? Commiserating over the knowledge that our kids would likely be exhausted and probably cranky the next day, and wow, was that going to be a fun time. And yet, even through our exasperation that night and many others like it, we knew that with each giggle and whisper, our kids, these first and second cousins, were finding a sense of safety within the walls of our grandpa's dream, his fort, and belonging with each other. Thank you.